Pam.
Yes.
One of the things that, again, that we're trying to make sure that we're doing with this is there truly is such a quality of agent that's attending this, which is really exciting to me. There are people that are out there really doing the business on a daily basis. And so I don't want to turn the class into nothing but that, obviously. But there's such a value in just being able to take a few minutes, 5-10 minutes at the very start and talk about the experiences that you're having right now in the business. What are you doing when you're walking out there into that market? What are you running into? What shifts have you seen even in the last month since the last time that we talked? So is there anybody that would like to start that conversation before we get into the study of the economic factors that we'll go into? How's it going out there right now? What's your read on the market? If you took the pulse based on your own experience, that gut that tells you what's happening, what are you feeling at this point? Who wants to start? Oh, please.
Say that a couple, last week, I had like 21 showings over the course of 3 days. There has to be a little bit more. This way, if we ever had that many pool to kind of go.
Yeah. Anybody, so 21 showings on one listing that you had, correct? You have the buyer and you're competing.
One homes, of course, in 3 days, just with me. Yeah, so more inventory.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have listings right now, but I have like more than the normal amount coming up. So that kind of, my personal experience is a bit more of a flow.
Okay, I want to go back to you because I think I missed it. You showed 21 houses?
Yes.
You showed 21 houses. So what price range, what city?
We were Chesapeake, Virginia Beach, lower price point, so I'm just struggling to, like that 3 to 350 range. And sad to say, we did not rise to get that.
Detached or detached?
Detached.
Detached.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was it a condition? I don't know. I think sometimes you just get a buyer and they think they want to buy, but I think they're gonna. So.
And when you were showing it to them, I think obviously what's going to increase those numbers is you're not focusing on Virginia Beach. You're not. I mean, it sounds like you were going from Virginia Beach, Chesapeake. Did you go out to Suffolk?
We didn't go
You
to
didn't go out to
Suffolk.
Suffolk. Portsmouth.
Actually, it's a military client, so I had her mom in town. Military, I was in town. So it was just a lot of weird dynamics, but just trying to familiarize them with the areas. You have to come in and do what you could do. But but the fact that we saw that many.
Yeah, that's really different. That's really different. Who else, when it comes to showing inventory, anybody else have an experience this week or this month?
Well, I've just been, 2 things. I've been monitoring inventory for clients who are shopping fall. If they want detached, possible, but they want close proximity to Oceana. So Envision, Red Mill, Ocean Lakes, all of those kind of areas are their prime, and their top is 400. And it's really, I mean, I've watched the market change over the years, but once upon a time when I was brand new, that was like bread and butter all day long.
Yeah, right.
Those houses, they might be competitive, and now it's hard. Okay, you're moving out, or you're gonna get something that's a cash.
Yes.
$400,000 house doesn't exist in those areas anymore, because even if it does, it's selling far beyond.
Yeah.
And that's just been sobering to see it very real. The other part is I have clients who want acreage with or without a house possibly, and I currently have a parcel of land that's for sale. And if you want to buy land in Virginia Beach for under $600,000, you can. Doesn't. And that's
In mine, I have 6 acres.
Same location.
I'll send you.
You have people that all bought together and it's like over
Nope.
$1 million. Okay.
Yeah.
But
I'll leave.
like 70 Park has a listing I plan to show them, and it's that and like one listing on Ballahack that have houses in acreage, and that's it for under $1.5 million. And it's how can it be all there is, but that's all there is.
How many of y'all remember the last time we had the conversation, we were talking about that reality check, when you're sitting down with the buyer, because what you just said is so true. It used to be that you could find anything you wanted at a $400,000 price point near Oceana. Now you can't. So the market data, right, has shifted. The market units that are out there have shifted. And we've talked about being able to sit down with that buyer in a counseling session and getting them realistic by letting the data educate them. Anybody remember that from last time? Has anybody applied that in a different way since we did it last month? Anybody bring that into a presentation and change it?
I didn't bring it to a presentation, but I did tell my client, she was looking for 2 bedrooms plus 2 bathrooms plus. But as of yesterday, she decided maybe I'll go with 1.5 bath. And it's because it's a change, so I've been giving her ideas, like there's one bathroom that has, the half bath has laundry in it, wash and dryer. I said, so maybe you can relocate that and make this a full bath. There's just shit that's attached, so it's like thinking outside the box. And she even said to me, she said, well, I'm thinking I might rent. And I'm, normally you don't say, okay, yeah, that's a good idea. That's not a good idea, you want to buy. But I understand, because even some of the listing agents that are listing the properties right now, what they're doing, they're just not educating themselves about the value of doing a little bit of work to the properties. And when you look online at the photos, if you don't know what you're looking for, it looks like it's a really nice home, but once you get into the details are not there.
You can do a lot of pictures.
Yeah, it's like, this is not good, and then, I don't think that you all do it, but when you put a house on the market, you want to either reflect the price, or the condition is there, and the buyers want to buy it.
Because
that's the-
people are throwing spaghetti at the wall with their let's just put it on.
Yeah.
Like it's COVID season. Let's just put it on.
And that's what some agents are
Yeah.
like, you put your name on this listing. Right.
Yeah.
And it's really the dynamic that I think we're all experiencing is, remember, we talked about a market in transition is when the areas are doing what? What?
Going in the same direction.
You got it, going in the same direction. So right now, what we have is a market in transition where we've got the listing units, so the activity, the available listing inventory going down. At the same time, we have buyer pool shrinking, right? So they're both doing the same thing. And we're going to see that again in regards to the data and the numbers, the percentages of how they relate to each other. But in something like that, I mean, you've got an individual that is experiencing this concept of truly buyer pool shrinking. It's almost like if we're standing there and we've had 15 people that came to us in the last 6 months, and you felt that activity. Now we have 5 people coming to us in the last 6 months, right? So, we feel that sense of something is changing, the market is tightening. But the problem is, again, it doesn't matter if it's 15 or 5, we're still turning around when they show up and there's less inventory to show. So there's still that confused dynamic. And we've always said that the arrows going in the same direction is a reflection of confusion. It always causes confusion in some of this. But what you just said about, I think I'm going to rent, a lot of times that person hits that mode when it's like, I don't really know where I stand. I mean, my gosh, I want to buy something. I should be able to, because the buyer pools are shrinking, they're shrinking, but then I go out and there's nothing, and the interest rates are changing. So here's my question. How many of y'all have dealt with somebody that has to rent, or that wants to rent, not has to rent, wants to rent? Like, let's just say in the last 3 to 6 months, because of the changes, that's where they went. So my question would then be, it's always about changing our skill sets. It's always about immediately being able to go to a toolbox and pulling from that toolbox something that helps you with that specific objection. So when you get, I think I'm going to rent, what's in the toolbox? What's your skill set? Go ahead.
I would say, if you're gonna get more regional area,
Yeah.
for them.
Which is part of a dialogue, right?
And I say, really, they don't have the drama, we just need to get the numbers.
Okay, so skill set again, what's your dialogues? How did they shift? We go back to, because you remember, Trudy, I sure do. I mean, you, Wendy, the whole conversation about if somebody is thinking about rent versus buying.
Yeah.
And we got away from that because it was like, there's no choice. when the differential in rent became so small from buying, everybody was gonna buy. Why would you rent? Now the differential is changing.
Right.
So are you going back to the skill set and the toolbox that says, what's my comparison of rent versus buying? We used to have to fill out the form.
Yeah.
How many of y'all have used a rent versus buying, fill out the form recently?
There's not many rentals either.
No, there
That's
isn't.
hard to find as well.
No, there isn't.
And what they're doing is always.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's another way.
Yes, I feel that. A lot of rentals that are coming in, a lot of them.
It's funny that you said that, Teresa, because for the first time, I mean, I study a lot of things when I go through that monthly activity report on RAIN. This time I went to the rental report
Right.
and looked to say, what's really happening with the rental report? How many units are coming in? And when I looked at it, there was a decent increase in Virginia Beach with units that were available for rent. It was starting to change a little bit. Now, it's not dramatic, but it's definitely increasing. So we know that here's what ends up happening with that. If we're going to have more rentals to choose from, and let's just say it really goes in that direction. If we have more rentals to choose from, then what's going to happen with rental prices?
It's gonna go down.
And see, they may not even go down dramatically, but they're going to stabilize. We're not going to see people bumping it up by $200. They're trying to get more money when somebody renews at that point. There's going to be a stability of it. And even some, you get enough competition, you may come in at $100, $150 less. If it changes, right? So we know that that dynamic may make it easier to rent, but that makes it even more important to deal with rent versus buy. And I'm not saying that that's what everybody's priority is at the table, but one of the things that I really want this course to be about is truly what's your toolbox? What's your skill set? When that objection hits, are you pulling it and you're prepared to deal with it? Not fly by the seat of your pants, trying to convince them. Let's talk for a minute and talk about, the statistical information. So if we're talking rent versus buying, somebody walk me through that. Tell me the most that comes to mind right now, knowing what we used to do. Yes.
So when I'm talking to my clients about renting versus buying, I talk to them about their net worth, building their credit, about their tax deduction. I talk to them about the unseen things, because buying a home does make you worth more. It raises your net worth.
Mhm.
And so I always talk to my clients from that perspective. I do throw in the why pay someone else's mortgage when you pay yours. I do throw in the house is going to cost more later than it is today. But I really work on the personal net worth, and it always makes the point.
Yes.
Every time.
Yeah. And going through what we've talked about right now, and going back to, we mentioned sway last time, is that it's been proven again that people have twice the emotional impact from fear of loss that they do for opportunity for gain.
Correct.
And so part of what happens is, which is what we do from a sales standpoint, somebody wants to talk about renting, and we're able to say, you can pay somebody else's, you can pay yours. There's a benefit of doing this. You're going to benefit from. And part of what we have to be able to do is convert what they're going to lose if they don't buy, not what they're going to gain if they do. I mean, gain if they rent. We've got to make that emotional shift in their head. So one of the things you said was the tax advantages, right?
Yes.
How many of you all have gone to a CPA, have gone to somebody right now to say, run me an example? I want to make sure I've got an updated example. Let me give you a sample client, somebody that's going to come in, want to buy this much, probably put this much down. Can you run for me a comparison of the tax deduction at this level and what the net payment is using your rent versus own form in comparison to what they're currently paying? Because I can tell you, from my standpoint, I've been meaning to do it, but I haven't done it yet. So I know most people have not done it yet. Have you talked to somebody that says, somebody that comes in at $1,750 or $2,500 or $2,200, if they buy something worth this, you're going to rent for this much. If you buy it for this much, your net payment is, because we're taking into account your tax, your tax benefits. How many of y'all can talk about
tax benefits, because you can fill out Schedule B, whereas usually you can only get a standardized deduction.
Yeah.
So it helps you in other regards, hopefully, in that too, because of all the interest you take.
It just makes me nervous to get into the tax, like, discussion, like, oh, you're, I don't know, I don't know.
And Jean, that's legitimate, but here's the difference. There is a general conversation to be had, and we're not even having that. You know, if we sit down and we're able to say, you need to make sure that, you know, I know you don't want to be at, you want to be at, you know, no more than $2,000 in terms of what you're going to look to rent for. What does that convert to when it comes to buying? An individual that is, you know, in your ballpark would end up having something similar to this, right? You don't even have to say, I'd like you to check this with your tax accountant or whoever it is you rely on, but keeping in mind that your net payment is really $2,000 to buy versus $2,000 to rent, right? At the end of that period of time. And we used to talk about taking extra exemptions. I mean, we were really talking legitimate information that helped people to go and say, if I bumped my exemptions, gave myself more money during a monthly basis, so I had an extra $150 in my income, and I could put that towards the payment. So my payment net was less. Then when I come back to my taxes, I had the interest write-off that's going to counteract the increase in my exemption numbers. Remember?
Yeah, and then the other thing is that's an eye opener is if they decide to rent, which I'm gonna use with my client, then you take the amount of money they're gonna rent and multiply it times 12. And when they see that big number sometime, that's an eye opener, say, hey, this money you're going away that you could have used toward purchasing your home.
Mhm. And then multiply that by 5.
Yeah, that's fine.
Right over a 5-year period, how much money they're talking about. Anybody else from the standpoint of just preparing for that person that legitimately sees that renting may be one of their options? Anything else? Oh, come on, buddy. You gotta have something, Sean, as many as you deal with.
I got two thoughts on there. Yeah. The longer, the better. The brainer, but the thing is, can you buy now? How much money you have to put down? And not, I'm thinking here, I've been through too with the downturn. I'm thinking of specific examples where they bought it in 06. They bought it in 07. They lost money, and it took them 11 years. Usually we're talking in a traditional market, 7 years. You'd be able to recoup the money and sell and break even on your own. We're seeing all these fun peaks and valleys instead of a straight appreciation. And I've seen plenty of examples where it took them 11 years just to get back to really break even. And then maybe a couple of years after that, we can actually get some money. So, you know, for me, I'm cautiously optimistic, but I have to be pragmatic. I'm telling you, you know, that the market is where it is right now, but it could change. I don't know, making promises could, my critical ball wrote that in 2006. So I'm thinking of examples like that. So that condos, they lost money and then they had to get them out and renovate them and sell them. So there's more of the story than just great simplicity.
There is.
There's a lot of nuance.
There is.
We're seeing more rentals on the market because people bought, you know, years ago and then they'll have to. And yeah, and then,
Yeah.
you know,
That's why I think some, they
right,
refinance, they're staying in the
Right.
home, because they're gonna have to get rid of that 2 or 3% interest rate and go up to a 7% interest rate when they just remodel, so they very well may be staying put.
Mhm.
They're gonna keep it home property because they're gonna have like cash.
Now- Go ahead, Wendy. I'm sorry.
I was gonna say, one of the things that I say is that you have the autonomy to do what you like with your home when it's yours. And adding on to the fear of loss, you don't risk the chance that they're gonna sell it, which most lease agreements say that they can assign it to someone else. Or they get evicted in, 12 months' time and they have to move at a time that doesn't work for them. So I like that layer on there that they have some control over their story.
Mhm. Okay. Go ahead.
And I think another small layer is housing affordability. Like they keep seeing the prices of houses go up and up and up. And if you continue to wait, can you really afford? Because if a $400,000 house is not, what it used to be, in 2 years, that may inch up to 425, and now you're steadily chasing the affordability
Yes, you
as
are.
opposed to trying to buy into it build some, your net worth, and then after that, you may be able to sell at a profit and move into something better.
Yes.
I had that conversation with this family, they've been talking a year out about home affordable homes for the first time buyers.
Right.
The only thing that kind of sticks in my head that makes sense is like a fast moving stream. You have to cross a fast moving stream because you only have one way. Like, when's the best time to get in? Now. So it's not gonna slow down.
It's not gonna slow.
It's not, it's not gonna like drive you trickle. And I think our market, because of all the economic factors of, military contracts, military members, government dollars, and tourism dollars, it is a fast moving stream. And it does have, higher levels and lower levels, but it's never gonna dry up to a trickle. And so it's going to get in, to get in. Because waiting is not going to be cheaper. And we've all heard the water still waiting for prices go down. When has that
When is that gonna
happened?
happen?
Well, and that's really legitimately why I'm so glad you all are willing to come on a monthly basis, because you can't give them that window into the market by showing up every 6 months. You have got to be able to see where the market is trending from month to month, to be able to tell them whether you're close to a shift, whether they're, we're still in this mode where things may be changing, but they're not getting anywhere close to being, the kind of change we saw in 2008. It's not in the numbers right now. The numbers don't lie. And the one thing that I did find over that period of time, Sean, is that we have this mentality that there is no crystal ball, because we know that from the standpoint of being in real estate. But I am telling you, and I think Wendy, you would probably agree, I think you would, Cynthia, as many times as we did it, that those numbers became a crystal ball. They told us where the market was going. If you track them on a monthly basis and you put them into a tracking system, it is literally telling you the direction of the market, which is the exciting thing for me. Now, the other thing I will say, at our peak, we own 28 properties. And so when I'm sitting down, especially with like a first-time home buyer, we didn't lose money on any one. Not one of those properties did we lose money on, not one. And the truth is, if I took you to my house right now, we're sitting on the bay. We look right out into the, the bay front, the house. And I'm not saying this to impress anybody. The house next door just sold for 1.8 million. The reason we have that house is because I had 28 properties that, as the market went just like this over and over and over again, I just held on, rode the horse, right? Bottomed out and peaked to the top. And by the time we were done, regardless of what happened on the appreciation of that property, which was still substantial over that period of time, somebody else was paying that mortgage off, and I just kept building equity after equity after equity. And it allowed me to take all of that equity and roll it into a home that, if I was going to my, my bank account to pay for, would have never happened.
Right.
The only reason it did is because the market didn't matter. It ain't, I would just say it's nothing but the market. It is what it is. And I've never once seen a time that investing in it, as long as you held, and that's what you're saying, there's no buying it and flipping it. Now, would I go in looking at what was going on in 2006, 2007, 6 and 7 flatlined? It was telling us that it was changing. It was passing into the, demilitarized zone of the 50 to 60%. It was going in the wrong direction. That's not the time that I would have known to put a military individual into a house that was going to sell in 2 years. That's not going to happen. I mean, you could see everything told us it was going in the wrong direction. So the young couple that we talked about last time that we were in here, that was first-time home buyers, ended up shifting because of the buyer counseling, getting reasonable about what they bought, who ended up buying that property that was $267,000 down there at the corner of Shore Drive and Pleasure House Road in that little condo section. They bought it and I had the confidence telling them, as a military couple, that when I could show them where you get wealth from, this is what wealth comes from. It rarely comes out of your bank account. It rarely does. At least not at this level. And you may have a good amount of money. It's still not, you're not going to make millions and millions by putting it in the bank account if you cash your check. You have to have assets working for you. And so the ability to sit down and have that credibility with them, to buy it, and then let them know that I don't care what you do, we're going to do everything we can for you to hold on to that property And of course, we check the condo docs, we check to see that they had the ability to rent. And the goal is you're holding on to that because that little baby that she's having one day is going to college. And if you don't want to put money into an account, this house is going to pay for it. You know, and then we're going to move you on to something else. So there is a confidence that I think we have to have when we sit down with them based on our experiences of what residential real estate has done for wealth building. Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, is there anything else? We'll move on to a different subject, but anything else that somebody wants to? Here's what I would just say to wrap it up. Dealing with a rental objection requires you to have a set of skills in the toolbox. If you hear it, your mind should automatically go dialogue, skill sets. What am I going to use? How am I going to answer this objection? And I never go into that with how am I going to manipulate this objection? How am I going to answer this objection? What is the legitimate answer? Because I would think, Trudy, you could probably give your opinion on this. I have many more experiences and memories of individuals that held and didn't buy and at a later date suffer from it than I ever did somebody who bought and suffered from it. Right? 90% of the time it worked in their favor. And I think a lot of people that sold and lost did so because they couldn't hold for some reason, instead of just flipping it over and putting it in. In 2008 and 9, I had 28 properties. That's when I had my peak of properties. I didn't lose one of them. They all rented through. They were covered, and we came out the other side with somebody paying for them that year. Now, or those couple of years. Did we probably stabilize rent during that time? Sure, but I had assets to work with. Okay. All right. Anything else that somebody has had the experience with since the last time? Anything else going on that's kind of strange out there? One of the things that I do want to talk about again today is that whole concept of ready, willing, and able. Right? What do you do? How do you define it? And I want to have a little conversation at the end about really having clarity on what ready, willing, and able means in this particular market right now. Okay, so we'll talk about that a little bit more. All right, pull out your sheets because I want to make sure that we have done the catching up of the direction of the market. And because we have a couple of people that again are coming in and catching up, bear with us while we just go through one more time. January will take us through so we can see where we're going, how we got to the market that we're in. And keeping in mind that again, that mentality that says in the start of 2022, almost 100% of the market was getting absorbed. Almost the same amount of listings that were coming in were being bought. You know, we send them in, we buy them up, and we send more and then they buy more. So this particular scenario was showing how tremendously active we were at the start of 2022, the 2022 start. And we were down 15% and sales were still going up, but it was minor, right? That 1.4% is starting to flatline a little bit. So it tells you a change is coming. But again, the change is never defined by one factor. It's always the interaction of two factors. It's never the idea that, you know, the demand is shrinking. It's a factor of how is demand shrinking as it relates to listing inventory, either going up or down. That's always the relationship. Okay, so going through, going back, and this is what I'm going to encourage you to do, is go back to your numbers and make sure you pick up all of the study for the one full year so that you've got that to pull from and rely on from January through December of 2022. So when you get into 2023, you're not having to go do all of those numbers over again. Okay, fair enough?
Fair enough.
So that would be your catching up at this point. All right, so going into February, we went from, and I'm just going to move through this real quick so we can just see. Again, we went from 92 in January to 82 in February, to 81 in March, to 79 in April, to 80, which was kind of again that little bit of flatlining through the the spring market, right, that had enough activity to just kind of stabilize for a bit. 80.27, 80.65 going into the summer, 81.82. About now, though, we're going to start feeling the effects of the interest rate. 82.52, 83.29, still going decently strong. 83.66, 85% by the end of December. So kind of just a year that just kind of went like this all the way through, stable enough. But we ended with 13% less in listings and 17% less in buyers or buyer pools at that point. So arrows both going in the same direction. The market was starting to obviously deliver confusion. So here we were in 2023. We came out of the gate again. This to me tells me that remember when we were in 21 and 22 and we were saying there's no change in the market, that we used to be affected by seasonal. We weren't affected by seasonal in 21 and 22. But this tells us that there's a changing in the market and that we're going back to, or at least we were going back to the idea that there is a seasonal impact starting to move into the market and stabilize some of the normalcy of the market. So we're at 63 coming out of the gate, but again, arrows going in the same direction. Now this was dramatic. I mean, you had sales down by 33%, listings down by 5 or 6. If that kind of differential continued, we would have started to have a shift in the market. If there was 30 and 40% reduction in buyer pools and only 4 or 5% reduction in listings, the buyer pool would start to, get some momentum on balancing this out and could be closer to shifting the market. But watch those numbers. Okay, so then we go into February, we're sitting at 63, we're rolling into our seasonal effect, but we go automatically to 15, 16% down in 27. And then in March 72, we were at 70 before, so we're having that stability of the spring market, but we're off by 18 and 27. Then we'll go to April 73, off by 21 and 26. I mean, you can see that there is a disconnect in the market, but is anything changing? No, I mean, we're supposed to be rolling in, figuring out in the coming month, how will I counsel my buyer? How will I counsel my seller? And that comes from seeing the pattern and the trend. And would you say right now that as of April, the trend was pretty much the same, had much change from one month to the next? Not much. We're still off by about 20% listings, 27% in demand, and we're still sitting at that 70 to 75% level. In April, 74 off. I don't know how I lost my number on that side, but it was almost 27, 28. And then there it is, 26. In May, this was the last month that we just did, we're sitting at 74. We're sitting at 20% off and 26% off. Again, nothing is changing. And to a certain extent, that doesn't make the conversation today that exciting, because people are saying, tell me what's going on in the market. The market's doing pretty much what it did last month. It's performing pretty much the same way it did last month. So if I'm sitting down with my buyer, I'm sitting down with my seller, I'm going to have to drill into a hyper local. I'm going to have to start looking not just in the overall market. I'm going to have to go and see, is their neighborhood performing in a different way? Is their price point? Is the type of house they're looking for performing in a different manner? Because this is kind of a vanilla idea of where we are right now. It's just kind of flat. Okay. So now our goal is we've got to go into our June study, and that's your job again. So we should be getting better and better at plugging this in. Pull out your form. Okay, now remember, we ended May with about 75% absorption. Somebody define that for me. What does 75% absorption mean?
75% of everything is still bought.
Very close. Yes. No, that's very, and the way that I think about it is if I'm thinking 75%, basically 3 out of every 4 homes that are listed are sold right now. You've got John and Mary, you have a 75% chance, which is a pretty solid chance of putting your house on the market and that market or that house selling. But I can tell you this, the more that number changes, I mean, if I'm walking in at 80 or 90%, there really is that reality that you don't have to fine tune everything to get it sold, right? But if I'm starting to move into the 70, and it's still very stable, but I'm gonna definitely emphasize the price right and the parade ready. Because that 75% will start to give you a little bit more, competition when you're showing. But at that price point, it's 3 out of 4. It's not 9 out of 10, right? It's 3 out of 4 selling. So there's still a little bit more going on in the market. And I want you to be ready in the way that we're priced right and parade ready to get them top dollar. The more this changes, the more important that becomes. Okay, so this is 3 out of 4. This is 8 out of 10. 8 out of 10 houses are selling. 8 out of 10 again, we're selling at that point. Okay, so let's go back to June. Here are your stats for listings. Gosh, can you see that? No, not well. Okay, let me read them to you. What we do, so keep in mind, so that you can see this when you're out, we're only going to look at the south side columns. We're only going to look at year to date. We'll study the market for the month itself to hyper drill. But for right now, we always use year to date totals in only the south side column. Okay, so here's your numbers. 2023, fill them into the right block for listing inventory. There were 12,512 listings taken year to date in the Hampton Roads market on the south side. 12,512. Okay, that is this year. In comparison to last year, there were 15,862 listings taken year to date last year. 862. 862, so 15,862. Now, 2021, there were 17,167 listings taken. Plug those into the right folder. And for any of y'all who are thinking about 2021, if you look back, it was really active. But look at, you've got almost how many more listings taken year to date from now versus what it was in 2021. 5,000. That's almost 50% more of the market we're in. That's a lot of difference in regards to the activity that was going on there. And that's why, again, way back then, we're talking every time you got write something, it's 15 and 20. Because the reason this is shrinking is that we're 5,000 less. But as I said before, it's always the relationship of the number of listings to the number of buyers, right? The number of people purchasing. And when this number is 5,000 off, you'd be thinking, well, my gosh, there still should be 20, 25. No, because the buyer pool is shrunk. So we've got 5,000 less, we've got a dramatically smaller buyer pool. So now maybe, unless it's a price right, parade ready, ready to go house, you've got maybe 5 or 6 on multiple offers at this point, which is why people need to understand the concept when you're talking to your seller that, yeah, your friend last year got 21. And they're saying, but there's no listings in the area. Yes, I know. That's why, excuse me, we're 5,000 listings less than we were 2 years ago. But the buyer pools are dramatically less. So we're going to still, the lack of inventory is going to drive price and demand, but we have a lot less people looking. So I won't get you to 20, but if we do this right, I might get you to 3, 4, 5, right? That's what our numbers are telling us. All right, then settled sales. Here's your settled sales number. In 2023, there were 9,000 year to date, 9,545 year to date through June. 9,545. In 2022, there were 12,732. And in 2021, there were 13,728. Okay, so you should have your numbers now in your squares. And now what you have to do is work both of your relationships, your ratios. The horizontal relationship is your absorption ratio, right? Put that in the left. And the vertical relationship is the growth or the reduction from one year to the next. Okay, and the number of units, the number of sales. Okay, we need some help. I'll walk around and help you. Okay.
Okay, so I'm just 2022.
Of 2022 for settled sales. 2022 for settled sales is 12,700. Good. We always say, so now we should let me. Who said Pam? Oh, I'm sorry, Don. Yes.
It'll be so much easier on an Excel table.
Yes, it will. Yes, you just plug it in and be able to plug it in every month and then graph it. The cool thing is in the PowerPoint,
Yeah.
which if you kept that and were using it in your presentations,
Mhm.
PowerPoint allows you to plug in data and it will automatically do it and change your graph in PowerPoint.
That's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go plug it in.
Yeah, it's very easy. We're doing- Okay. Okay.
So this one I did this year.
Again, you should have the ratio, which is horizontal, and you should have the vertical relationship of growth or decrease from last year.
Over last
The
year.
percentage.
Okay.
Because I got.
You know, what we should have brought is the sheet that Melanie did, because Melanie had, I'm sorry, Melanie. Dang it. Because, oh, you've got it. We'll send you, if it's your first time coming here today, we'll send you the sheet. Melanie, our marketing director, took it and put all the details on it, which is really cool, which included. Did you include on this, Melanie? You've got the absorption ratio, but we didn't do the vertical one, did we?
I think it says by the arrows what it's supposed to mean, the trend from year
Yeah,
to
no,
year.
I'm talking. Okay, on here, if you don't know how to do the vertical, I don't think we have it on here, so maybe we modify this. and
Yeah,
we'll
yeah, I'll add that.
Chip.
I don't remember how to get it.
Yes, vertical is last year's numbers, like last year's units, minus this year's units equals, you gotta get a number.
Yeah.
Once you get that number divided into last year's number will give you a percentage of increase or decrease. Make sense? So, okay, like if I had 10 was last year's and 5 was this year's, it would be 10 minus this year 5 equals 5. And then it would be 5 divided into last year 10 is 2. It would be a 20%. Well, it'd be a 50% decrease. Mhm. 10 divided by 5, that's right.
I can't do that out loud either. Doesn't definitely address it, I'll use the calculator.
I'll add that to the sheet and make sure that
Yes,
everybody
yeah.
has that for next time.
we'll add that, Melanie, and then that way we can send it out to some of the people that are here for the first time.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Even if it's not your first name.
Yes, oh, that's right, because the ones that haven't been, we'll give you an updated version. Yes,
Yes.
okay.
I did not know I had to come in here and think about stuff today.
This was not,
This was not on
this
the
was
agenda.
economic factors, you should know better, huh?
I know.
Okay, and after you've worked your numbers out, I want you to get at least 2 or 3 people, and I want you to discuss them. I want you all to talk about them. What does it tell you? Did you learn anything from these numbers that you didn't
That's the
know?
question.
Right? Look it over.
Yeah, 21.1.
Okay. Okay, I'm on the second one. Okay. You might have got it. Might be on the right track.
So maybe I did put on last year. So, well, that was 3. This year, 9, 5,
How are y'all doing?
7.
Who's done at this point? Okay, I know Jean, you look like you're done. I know she is. Yeah. Well, that was usually what happened when we came in. She'd be calculated and ready. It was like, okay, what else are we gonna talk about today? Now, I'm hoping I can get these figures in right last night. Okay.
Yes.
Yes. And this number is last year, so that's this year. Then that number divided by this number equals the growth of the protection. That's gonna tell you whether listings are going up or down from last year and sales. Are going up this year. Okay, all right, are you all ready to look at your numbers?
Yeah.
All right,
All right.
here's what I have. Is this what you got? Did I do it right or wrong? I have to tell you, I was doing it kind of late. Is that right? Okay, good. All right, so what's the narrative? What's the story? I mean, seriously. I don't want you to get to the point that you're bored with the numbers, right? It's like the whole purpose for this is to check every 30 days. How does it change the story that you're gonna tell a buyer or sell in the next 30 days, or will it change the story? Okay, so we've got, let's just make sure that we review them. So as of last year, we were at 80%. As of this year, we're at 76.29. It only matters in comparison to the trend. So we go back and we look back here and we had 74.66 last month. We're at 76.29 this month, right? Or year to date at least. You've got an 80.26 relationship. You've got 21% off. So we've got 21% less listings year to date. We have 25% less sales year to date. So how does it change? Are you changing anything? If you were going to see a seller today, what would your advice be in regards to pricing? Do you think you're going to be neutral, aggressive, or start to look at adjusting pricing based on what we have?
Just spoke with the seller this week and I kind of just said, you know, he wants to sell at top dollar, naturally, like everybody's been doing, but I was just trying to say, you know, that this is where, you know, I feel that it's fair to still market it correctly. You know, you can always drive the number up, but when you're pricing it high, and then you're driving the market up, and then you have, and oh, by the way, people don't have the cash to guarantee the appraisals anymore with the interest rates going up, unless they do have that medically. But I'm trying to be fair, all that, you know, and maybe that's a discussion y'all can help me with, because I will always price it where the seller wants me to price it, but I, at the same time, like to be realistic and help them make, you know, get their bang out of their buck, so to speak. But just doing it greatly to drive it. You know, if you price it right, maybe even a little higher, you're still gonna drive it up. But if you're pricing it way overpriced, these people can't even qualify. Young buyers can't qualify for those $400,000, $200,000 homes like they used to be able to do, somewhere in between there. But yes, I'm kind of like for the first time, kind of in a pickle. And it's a beautiful Norfolk property. One of Jeff Balance's properties over there in the Kensington area. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that area. So he's trying to debate, bought it 3 years ago in 2017 for like $329. And after doing my competitive market analysis, even discussing with my husband, you know, to get his thoughts. You know, his price range, you can tell that, that's pretty bad. It is, you know, kind of like the old.
To call him.
At the end of the day. Absolutely. And, so, you know, his property now is worth somewhere in that ballpark range, sorry, Drew, of that 4 to 425, but he wants to go higher than that. And, you know, so we're kind of, and then he's also debating renting it out. So I did that, analysis as well for him. And, you know, I think he could, if he could make $100,000 off your house and where it's located, I would do that versus renting. And that is my own personal opinion about it, but
Okay,
because I don't know that years down the road, he's gonna make $100,000 off that house. Now, could he have an investment piece where somebody pays that mortgage off? Yes, but will he make, you know, trying to guesstimate whether he'll make $100,000 off that house again? It's
okay.
what I'm really trying to figure out.
You missing?
Yeah.
Tell me what you do. You have a listing appointment tomorrow. You know your numbers. You've seen what's going on. Do you? There you go. What are you gonna tell
Depends a lot on the product,
them? Okay.
but.
First of all, let me stop you right there. The true answer is it depends. Doesn't it? It depends in this market. This kind of, you know, back then when this was sitting at 90, it didn't depend. You went in and nailed it no matter what, because at 90%, almost everything is having multiple offers. Everything is shoving. But at this, it depends on what aspect of the market, what area of the market, what type of market you're dealing with, right? So go from there.
So, yeah, so in this case, it's gorgeous and it's, you know, it's, I think we're gonna end up in the high sevens probably if she goes with what I'm saying. But we'll probably sell it for over 8, like that's the house it's gonna be. So, and I always do, and we were just talking about this last night actually, but I always kind of tell my sellers, here's what I think an appraiser is gonna put on it. And it's not one number, it's kind of a range, you know, and after I do my nerdy analysis. And then I'm like, okay, that's not the number we want to sell this house for. Usually, if it's a house that's kind of average, I say, we're hoping to get that number. You know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
that's what we're gonna sell it for that. But this house, I'm gonna say, I'm going to list it at that number that I feel confident an appraiser is gonna put on it. And then let the market push it up, because then every agent knows if they're writing an offer higher than that, I'm nervous unless you guarantee it. So that's the number I'm shooting for. So in this case, with these kind of numbers and watching that specific neighborhood, because you always gotta go my neighborhood, I'm telling this person tomorrow, we're gonna list it probably 780, and we might get 850. Like, that's not what I think.
Okay.
So, but it totally.
Now, I have terms for those two things. One of them is the market threshold, right? The market threshold to me is that price that you said at 780. It's the one that I think I can get the appraiser to support.
Yeah.
Right.
When I walk in, this is our safe number. I know I can pull comps. I know I'm not the appraisers. I may have to do a little bit because maybe the last sale was 750 or 60, but I really feel like I could need an appraiser.
Not
Right.
appraiser, but some stuff is like that.
Right, no. 77780. But I feel like I'm safe there. I feel like the pricing threshold is safe there. Now, this particular property has the opportunity for what I define as premium pricing, right? And that premium pricing is not always driven by the statistical data or the last sale. It is driven by demand. And so what we're going to do is assess a demand specifically for that particular house, market, subdivision, neighborhood, price point, to figure out what kind of demand I think we might get. Because my one dialogue is, if I start here, and as you just said, I don't expect to sell it here. I expect to sell it here.
Right.
But what I have to do is get the buyer to own the difference. That's what I'll tell them. So marketing threshold, the market threshold for pricing is our safe spot. I really believe that we've got the ability to obtain premium pricing, and everything in between that is what I want the buyer to own. So that if the appraiser nails it here, I've still got somebody else other than us guaranteeing it. Because what I see agents do sometimes, that's a mistake, is they really believe they can sell it for 850, or they believe, 825, and the last sale was 775, they put it on at 825, somebody pays 850. Because they're thinking it's gonna sell for that, and who guaranteed the difference? Then the dang thing comes in appraised. And now you're back to arguing with the buyer or the buyer's agent as to how to close the gap between these numbers, because guess who owned from 775 to 825?
Right.
The listing agent, the seller. So, and they're in the driver's seat at that point, they're in a position of strength.
They usually can see that, but some of them can't. But the other thing I always say too is you're gonna have more competition if we are, keeping it here versus one guy writing the 850 offer and then he doesn't feel like he has the problem.
Right.
If we have like 10 people down here, obviously that is different,
Right.
And so they know they gotta commit, to get it up there.
Yeah, and that does bring up something else from a premium pricing standpoint. Do we ever know what the real number is, what the high top dollar number is? You don't. You have no idea. And a great example, I might have mentioned it before, but when a great example of not knowing where that top dollar was, I knew what the market threshold was. I knew we were going to get premium pricing, but could I see we were going to be 20,000 over, 50,000 over, 75? You didn't know, because what turned out to happen in those two is it came down to a California buyer, and I mentioned this before, competing with the buyer whose sister's property backed up to the back of the house. That premium pricing and that debate and that, that auction mentality between these two drove that price dramatically higher than had those two people not been the two competing.
Right.
Because the California buyer said it's a good deal anyway. And the other buyer said, this is such a unique set of circumstances that I could buy the house right next door and it's still not worth that much to me. That house went, we had a threshold of 425. I think I put it at 450 because I felt like I could substantiate it with the seller, and it sold for 565. They paid in Norfolk over $100,000 more for that house because the buyer in California had a blank check.
Yeah.
And the buyer that bought it was actually the sister who had a lot of money, could put it in, wanted that door to open between the two things. She had a pool in her backyard and her nephews and nieces were gonna be able to walk through the back. That whole mentality had no price tag. It's like priceless, what is this possible? And that was priceless to her.
Right.
What did it price for?
It didn't matter, they guaranteed it.
Okay.
They guaranteed. But the cool thing is, again, when you've done that, have you locked a new price into the neighborhood? Because it closed at that, and here's the interesting thing. She had one sister that lived here, her other sister was her agent. So not only did we get 565, but she cut her commission. So my seller's net was higher than 565. So, when you look at that kind of relationship, I don't know what premium pricing is. Here's what I do know. The more demand I get working, the higher the price goes. It's like anything else.
What's hard then is you did set a higher price for the neighborhood, but not everybody's gonna have the sentimentality or
Right.
whatever else. And so other people think they're gonna get it when their house is
Yeah, that's a good point.
not the
Yeah.
same.
And that's very true, but I can tell you what it does. It may not raise you up to that, but they're sure not selling 425 anymore, right? They
Value
had
goes
to
up.
take an adjustment, and this house was beautiful, and we staged it, and we had the pool in the back, and it was going, we did a really true job on that house to have it ready. It was priced right, and it was parade ready. But it did raise the neighborhood, no ifs, ands, or buts about it, and that kind of makes you the hero to go into the neighborhood and do what you can to get the next one, right? So really good point. Premium pricing, market threshold, making sure that the right people own the increase, okay? So we've got, again, we look at this and say, well, darn, we've got arrows going in the same direction. Not only is this graph, because if we take this now, oh, look at here, this is the other point I wanted to make. We can look at this and say, well, shoot, we've got almost 22% change in listings. We've got a 25% change in sales. These are getting close. That's what our number gut tells us. Gosh, listing pools are dropping by over 20 and buyer pools are dropping by over 20, over 25.
Mhm.
There's not a whole lot of difference between those two. But there's two things we have to look at. And that's what I love about the RAIN data when you're really looking at your report. Because if you're getting ready to go into Virginia Beach and list it and not Norfolk or Chesapeake, the Virginia Beach current listing is off by 31. So current residential listings, year-to-date change in units in Virginia Beach is 31%. Is that different from 21%? Right? So when you're, again, we said, when you get into a market like this, you have to hyper drill. You have to start drilling down to, okay, let me make sure that I'm not just taking the south side. Let's look at the city. Let's look at the price point. Let's look at the subdivision. Let's really drill in so that when we walk in the door, we know our numbers. Okay, so that's the first thing. The second thing is this. This is tracking. You can see it's tracking now. And that's what I was just telling you, Alicia, that in PowerPoint, this is a PowerPoint slide. PowerPoint, if you start graphing it, which allows me, if I want to walk in and make a listing presentation, I can pull these into a minor mini listing presentation. And every time I update for the month, which is what I did last month, I just open this slide, I hit edit data at the top of it, I drop in the number and it creates my update. So this is happening in PowerPoint. Okay, so you should be able to do this, but look at this and look at that. Look at the relationship between those two bumps, which comes back to some of the stuff you're referring to, Sean, about knowing your previous market and looking for similar patterns, right? So you've got a 2001, 2, 3, 4, and the interesting thing is about 5. Right now, 2005 is about the same place as 2003. It's had the same curve. It's kind of come over the other side. And the truth is with 2005, this is where our bottom was. So we were still 6, 7, well, actually it's like right at 8. So we're still about 3 years away. In 2005, we were 3 years away from the bottom. But was it changing? Yes, I mean, absolutely, you know, Creston was coming down, but one of the things you have to remember is this is the zone. When it gets near that zone, that's when my radar goes up, right? Because when it's here, we're not there yet, things are changing, but the market is still so substantial because keeping in mind that really everything over the 60% favors the seller. I don't care what else is going on. Listing sales, whatever it is, the relationship between it, that relationship right now says that we are still in a market that no matter what it feels like, the sellers are still not giving their houses away. There may be some pockets that I have to look for, because once I get down to close, if I get into 60 to 70% of it moves into that, that's when I really do know if I check them closely. Some markets are still getting multiple offers and some aren't. And so I need to know which one is mine, right? And I was talking to one of the agents. She had called me about 2 weeks ago. She was looking at a piece of property that was over here, little condo. And she was looking at pricing, you know, premium pricing. What am I going to go for? And so in looking at what was available, wasn't a whole lot of comparable sales available, but where she was, I thought was still being conservative. And so the question was, go check, change your hat. You've got the buyer. They're going to afford this price range. You put this one on the market tomorrow, or somebody puts this one on the market tomorrow. You're going to show it. Tell me what else you're showing them. Right?
Yeah.
So by the time she went out and looked for everything else, she would show that particular buyer. If she put that one on the market, there was zip. There was one property, and it sat in the backside of the Haynes tract. You know, Haynes, or they're off of Norfolk. The comparison between the two units or location was not the same. The location of the one she was talking about was dramatically better. And so my question to her was, what do you think your demand's going to be? Look at your last 2 listings in that subdivision. What were the market times? How quickly did they go? And so the comfort zone was you can push a little bit. push it a little bit, see what you've got. You're bound to have more than one offer because there's nothing else to show them that is sitting in this particular market. Okay? And that's what I think you find when you're sitting up here. When we get into this, you're starting to see inventory available in most every place.
Mm.
And we're not there yet. Okay? So that's the first thing. Here's what's interesting about this, and this is why there's a relationship between these two things. This does kind of indicate to you that something's changing, right? But then the question is, how quickly? When you go see that seller tomorrow, nothing's changing between now and 30 days. Not from when this says. The same dynamic you have today is probably the same dynamic you'll have in the period you need to interact with that seller. But our gut is, oh, but something is changing. But here's why it matters that you drill and drill and drill, because that was the comparison of year to date. This is what's happening in the year. This is the ratio of, this is where January was, February, March, April, May, June. Where is the activity going year to date? It's going up. It looks like it's going down, right, in comparison to what last year did. But year to date, in this particular year, is this particular year going down with the overall trend of year to year? No, we're still in such a positive market that we're not moving down, we're moving up in our ratio of absorption right now. So it shows you how important it is to be watching really all of this. Okay. And here's the other thing. And what time is it right now? Okay, good. Then I'll give us about 10 minutes. This is what I want to do. I want to show you a couple of other things. Here's your pending numbers, which again, especially in a market that has transition, after I'm done looking, I'm always going and checking any other litmus tests I can give myself for the direction. And pending is always going to be one of those things. So a pending sale, looking at June, shows that pending in June for South Side, well, this actually is for total of it, but not looking at, calculating these on a regular thing. Pending in June, these things will usually run pretty close. I've done these relationships separate, and it's amazing how close the reduction or the increase is to both markets. They almost run parallel, just smaller. So if I look at this year-to-date change in June, excuse me, not year-to-date, change in June from where we were in terms of pending sales this month versus pending sales last month, 45% increase in pending sales. Now, does that tell you that that's going to go up or down?
Up again.
Most likely it's going up again. So again, all of these litmus tests, we talk about again, the crystal ball mentality of what can we use here to create our own, is this, the statistics are telling us where our market is right now, and it's stable and it's still strengthening. Now, that could change dramatically by one factor. What's the one factor that could change and flip our market?
Interest rates.
It could be interest rates, and because interest rates would shrink the demand. But what would really change all of this data? Say it again. Well, that's one of the factors, yes, because it would flow from that.
Quantitative easing.
Sort of, yes. Nope. If listing inventory increases dramatically, does everything change?
Absolutely.
Right? If all of a sudden we had a doubling, a tripling of, everybody started to put their houses on the market, then all of a sudden we'd have this shrinking demand, this increasing listing, prices would start to fall because you would be out showing everybody 20 houses every time you put them in. The buyers would be in the driver's seat. That listing inventory growing would absolutely change the dynamics of the market. But here's the difference. Is listing inventory based on everything doubling in the next 6 months? There's nothing.
I think the only thing that would make it explode is if interest rates drop dramatically.
Yes.
They'll feel like they're married to their house.
Yes,
But so that would also increase the demand side.
that's it.
As well. So,
See, that's it.
yeah.
Because if the rates are where they are and listing inventory goes up, that doesn't automatically increase the buyer demand. It just gives them more, it gives them more control, right? It gives them more confidence that they're in control. And now all of a sudden, what's gonna happen to your prices? They're gonna start making offers on that because they have 15 other options. So when interest rates drop, it's going to propel both markets. The listing inventory will increase because I can use the rate if I can find something. But it's also going to grow the buyer demand. So you've got that stabilizing again of those two markets. But listing listing inventory, as all of you said, it's not changing anytime soon. There's no chance it's going to all of a sudden just blow up.
Right, even if it's more.
It-
it's not gonna be like-
Yes. And remember what we said here the last time, we talked about 21% off and 25% off. But we said again, let's use an example, because I don't think you were here the last time either, Laura. Let's use our example, and I've used this twice with buyers since we've talked about it last time. Is if we again think of musical chairs, right? And we've got, let's say every chair represents a listing, and we've got 20 chairs in the room, so we've got 20 listings. But we have 40 buyers standing outside, which is where our relationship is right now. Like we've had a lot of buyers based on the number of listings. Even today, we have that. So if we have 40 out here and we have 25% reduction, how many does that leave us out there? How many buyers that leaves it? 25% walk away. We have 30 left, right? But we've got how many listings inside? 20. If we have a 20% reduction in 20, if we take away 20% of the chairs, how many does that leave us? Almost.
16.
20% of 20 is 4.
My math is off.
16. That's okay. Don't worry, you're looking really pretty today. So it doesn't matter. Right?
You're not smart today.
Well, just for the moment.
For the moment,
For the moment.
for the next 5
Just
seconds.
for that one moment. Right? All right, so if we've got now 16 listings, 16 chairs, and we got 30 buyers that want them, do we still, it doesn't matter if this had more. We had the relationship was already skewed. So even though this looks like a bigger jump than that, it's not. All it's done is it's closed it a little bit. Because I might not have to fight over 5 chairs, I'm only fighting over 3 chairs, right? You know, it's like, or maybe not 3 chairs, I've got 5 chairs. The demand relationship is changing, but it still doesn't change the dynamic of the market. Right? So just being aware of that, making sure that you're watching that closely.
Okay.
And then, so we've got that. Now here's some of the other statistics. Look at again in this report. Look at the current supply inventory for Norfolk through, and we've got, this is your absorption rate, which remember is different from ratios, right? An absorption rate is the number of months available or necessary to clear current inventory based on the actual number of average sales.
You'll need to tell us what it is, we can't see it.
Okay, and it shows 1.4 through 2.3, I think. Northampton, which we're not even going to talk about. So anything here is 1 to 2 max months to clear inventory. We know clearly, if you know your absorption rates, 6 and over is a seller's market. Anything below 6 usually indicates a buyer's market. The closer you are to 1, the stronger, the seller's market. The closer you are to 1, the stronger the seller's market. This is still at 1 to 2% to clear inventory. So there's your next ratio. That's your next data input to where is the market, okay? And then in looking at this average resale by city, you've got, for example, let's just take Virginia Beach since we're sitting in it. We've got in 2022, median list was 370. In 2023, median list is 416. In 2022, average price was 570. In 2023, it's 648. Does that look like it's going the wrong direction to you? Okay, so now we go back to what you said. Now you got a buyer that says, I think I'll wait, I'm just going to rent. And they're making all of those decisions on one thing, the rate. Right? And how many of y'all remember last time we were talking about this? One of the things that I did on one of my properties was go back to 2003 when I bought it. That's still sitting in rental inventory for me at this point. And I checked the average interest rate. I checked the actual interest rate, the 30-year interest rate when I bought it, and the rate was at 6%. So here we've got this mentality that is locked in with these buyers to the last couple of years. That's all they know. And yet I've got a piece of property that I bought in 2003 at 6% that is almost paid off. One of them actually is, the other one is not. Almost paid off by somebody else paying the rent for me since 2003. Right? So in looking at this, now here's the other thing to again remember, average list price, knowing the difference between those two, right? So the average list price is where you take all the sales that occurred that year and divide them by the number of units. So how many sales occurred in 2023, divide year-to-date 2023, add them all up and divide by the number of units. That gives you an average sales price or list price in this case, and you can do the same for sales. But here's the difference. It says if one or more properties were sold at an extraordinarily high or low price, it skews the average. If you've got all of these happening here, then there's this and here and this, and that averages in, it will pull the average down, right? Whereas the median list, when they're talking about that, is they take all the sales prices and figure out based on all of those where the middle is, where there's as many sales on the left side that occurred lower than that median as there are on the right side higher than that median. Okay, so they tend to use median when they're talking about numbers just because they feel like it's a little bit more of a definite number to work with. All right, so here's what we want. I want you to do. You've got like 5 minutes. I want you to take this sheet because I do want to try and move this from not just using it for this purpose, but to start pushing it out. How many of you all are doing a monthly economic update?
Guess we'll do a video.
Right, video, something that you're putting out to people. Okay, I want you to take at least 3 people that are sitting around right now. And based on what we talked about today, I want you to try and come up with. Eugene.
He's doing selfies and autograph pictures.
Oh, yeah, no, our complex real estate market. By shots. Good shot.
How did you do that? You know, I gotta take a video.
I was gonna say, what you want to do is sit next to me. Right, I want you to take everything we've talked about today, and if you were to choose 10 topics that you would have to say, let me do a quick review to all of my clients, let me put a YouTube video up, let me, post something that says, here's the economic factors update for the month of June. What would you be using based on what we've talked about today? Come up with at least 10. What time is it right now, Cynthia?
11:29.
11:29. Okay.
5 minutes to that here.
Right, your best, and then we're gonna share so we can start trading them off. I want you to walk away with 10. That if you chose to record a video, you could say, let me pull these numbers and let me share them with everybody and send them out. That's a good article, Jamie. It's a great picture too. That's really nice. You're flying through that. Good for you. Okay, here's what we're gonna do because we're at our time. I want you to, I'm gonna start with you, Alicia. I want you to throw out one thing that you said that you would include in your economic update report, okay, this. Write it for a magazine, record it and send it out as a video to your, your database, put it on Facebook and or Instagram. No, name one thing, and I'm gonna go around the room, and as you hear it, if you don't have it on your list, add it. Okay, go ahead.
I think my database needs to understand what the absorption rate versus the absorption rate ratio. So start at the basic and then build.
Okay, so you might start with a quick definition we're going to cover today. Let's talk about what an absorption ratio is, and let's talk about an absorption rate, because these are two ways that I am measuring the market and where it's going.
Exactly.
Right? Good job. Okay, go ahead. Next.
Like what type of a transition are we really in?
Okay, market transition. So are we talking about like buyer's market, seller's market? Where are we within that relationship? And again, right now, we're kind of in the middle of a transition. It's transitioning, both areas are going the same direction. Great conversation. Another thing you could throw in regards to the first. Okay, are you thinking about renting out there? Well, one of the things that you want to compare is, right? Another great topic to be throwing in there for a few minutes. Go ahead.
I thought you could do a story like you did and just pick a property. That's and show the appreciation, and that's not for all these markets.
Okay, which is really the message we're after, is that it's always a good time to buy, right? There's always a set of circumstances. It's not just about the rate. And wouldn't that be a great way to address it? A lot of people are making decisions today based on rate alone, and it's not just about the rate. Let me share an example with you, right? It's a great way. Sean.
Historical numbers. It's been a long view.
Okay, so the relationship between where it was to where it is. Okay, good. Jean.
Let's see everything with the median home price. I think, because nationally, I think the numbers are going the other direction more so.
See, I think that's great, because if you're looking at, if you go back there and, oops, I took the darn thing off. If you're back there and you're looking at this, that's not it, so don't look at that. Where's my median? Oh, well, it's in there somewhere. But if you're looking at the fact that we are increasing by 12% on a median price, do people believe that now? Most people don't think our prices are.
The media thing, but
The media.
Right. The ability to say, a lot of people are hearing that there's a lot of changes going on and prices are falling. Well, let's update you on the Virginia Beach or the Hampton Roads or whatever it is. And you're looking at increases, not decreases. I think that's perfect. Say it again. Yes, it is. Real estate is local, and it's becoming hyper local. Yes, go ahead.
Real estate and relationship network.
Okay, all right, how you build net worth from real estate. Got it? Great message. Those kind of things to me are like the intro of being able to say, let's talk about this and why it's important to you. That most people's net worth is based on real estate. It's not based on
What's in their bank.
their bank account. Okay, go ahead.
Well, I just really like the example you gave of investment property you purchased at a 6% rate, and how I'm just reminding folks that where interest rates are now can't be compared to where they most recently were, because many of those were artificial. We're not
Yes,
going back there.
yes,
So, once upon a time, this was a great rate in other areas, and people still being invested, still want
mhm,
added, everything else we talked about, it's why that's so good.
right. Okay, and it comes to mind when you say that. I think about, I wonder what stocks you could have bought 15 years ago at what price. That today you're not ever buying at that,
I
right?
used to work for a company that worked for Apple, and we had the option to buy Apple stock, and I was, my company's looking at it, and the shares were like 420 a piece. Gosh, I can't even buy one, and now. Yeah, it's not, that's 24 for one share.
Wow.
Holy cow, they're now, they sound right up.
Yeah, and that's always the trick, is finding out when that is.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So to add to what she's saying, I think that it's still a great time to sell, because the numbers aren't going down, and therefore it's a good time to buy as well, because you can always refinance when the interest rate changes. That interest rate
Yes.
is there regardless.
Yes, and what I get from what you just said is, what comes into my mind immediately is the person who says, I think I'm gonna wait. How many of y'all have said lately, I think I'm gonna wait? Let's talk about that. What are some of the factors that can help you make that decision? And then you've got 3 or 4 things that indicate that waiting may not be working in your in your, best, it's not in your best interest at that point. Go ahead,
And
Wendy.
just, and I think just to piggyback on that, using like your 5-year, well, where do you want to be in 5 years? What do you want your portfolio, your network to look like in 5 years?
Yes, okay, go ahead.
I like the idea of the PowerPoint as well, and then pointing out the pending rate. You know, if you have to drill down even more.
Yes.
Pending sales.
And I think what that comes to is the basics of being able to say, just for your update this month, our pending sales are up 45% in June. It's like just pulling out 3 or 4 of the really key statistics that are on here. Our listing inventory is down by 20%, right? Our buyer pools have decreased by 25%, but we had such an imbalance to start with that the listing inventory is still too small for the buyers that are in the market. The 75% of the buyers that are still in the market. So just the ability to explain to them, so when they're hearing a story that counteracts that they know the story locally.
I like the graph about just how we are going up in Virginia Beach, because nationally we do hear about things going down.
Yes,
And I know we're very fortunate to have the military here to help us, but
yes.
that's very interesting. And to tell people, so you don't wait.
Yes, and we do have some, we talked about it again, we do have some changes that there is some level of seasonal effect. And that we can be aware of that, because if it starts a little bit slower in the first, and then we go into a spring market, then we stabilize a little bit in July and August when it slows down, when everybody really is kind of distracted, and then we go back into a little bit stronger right before we get into the holidays. We're starting to see a little bit more of that pattern occurring. So just kind of preparing people that just because, again, it goes kind of dormant in July doesn't mean that there's not a seasonal effect, not just, the market's changing, okay? So
The other thing is compare type of local markets. So if somebody wants to buy in one market, you can give them the benefits of buying in this market compared to the other market for investment as well.
yes, okay, all right, good stuff. All right, did you get enough out of the class today to come back next month? Because that's really what matters. But you really feel like you'll walk away with enough that you'll be here again, because you contributing makes it so much different. Okay, now one other thing that I wanted to mention, Katie said that Trudy offered to take anybody to lunch today that wants to go. So I don't know if you all are open to it, if you have time, but where she was going to go across to this cantina.
Cantina Laredo.
Yeah, across the street, the Mexican one across the street. Anybody, if you can't go, we'll try and do it again next month, but who can go? Anybody here have time? We've got a couple. Can you make it happen? Make a phone call.